I wake up every day before the sun. The silence in the house is so deep that it seems to have weight, squeezing my chest. Once upon a time, footsteps, laughter, the smell of fresh bread mixed with coffee could be heard within these walls. Now, there is only the creak of the old door and my heavy breathing. My hut on the outskirts of the town stands like an abandoned sentry on duty. No one needs it, but it still stands. I am the same. No one needs it, but I still breathe. My children are successful. Each has their own business, apartments with expensive wallpaper, foreign cars that cost more than my entire factory once did. I was proud of them, raised them in strict rules, in honesty, in the ability to move forward. But now, when I call, they answer briefly, distantly, "Yes, Dad, we'll call later." But later never comes. They live their own lives, in which there is no place for me. Grandchildren? Cold, harsh. They'll come for a minute and immediately get on their phones. There's no curiosity in their eyes, no respect. They look at me like an old object that should have been taken out of the room a long time ago. Sometimes there's irritation in their voices. Why am I still here? Why am I taking up space? I hear it between the lines, even though they don't say it out loud. In the store, I'm a shadow. The saleswoman glances past me as if I'm an extra in the queue. Young people laugh when I slowly count out the change. In the hospital, they don't listen to me. The doctor quickly waves me away, throws a standard phrase, without even looking me in the eye. For them, I'm a statistic, another grandfather, a mark in the admissions log. I used to be different. My word had weight. People turned to me for advice, raised their heads when I entered the room. I was the one who could decide destinies. Lead. And now, when I get a bad check and I try to speak up, I'm just ignored, like an old dog barking behind a fence. Loneliness eats away at me slowly, like rust. I try to fight, read the newspaper, write little notes in a notebook, so I don't forget who I am. But every day that I don't get a call, when the door stays locked and no one knocks, is a small nail in the coffin. I don't sleep at night. I lie there, staring into the darkness, and I feel something rotting inside. It's not just old age, it's not just illness. It's a deep resentment that's growing, taking root in me. From indifference, from betrayal, from the fact that my whole life, those years of struggle, work, loss, turned out to be useless to anyone. I start to catch myself having strange thoughts. I wish they could all feel, at least for a moment, what I feel, to make their self-confidence crack, to make them know how painful it is to be unnoticed. My house is empty, but something new is accumulating in the walls. I feel a shadow being born in me, which at first only contemplates. It is silent, but it watches intently. And with each passing day, its breath becomes more noticeable. I often think about the past, maybe too often, because I'm still alive there. There I'm still the one they were afraid to lose and were proud of. Now there are only fragments. I remember how it all began. When I was young, I had nothing but broken hands and stubbornness. I dug, carried, collected, day after day, brick by brick. The business didn't arise by itself. I created it from nothingness, amidst dirt and distrust. Everything that my children now call heritage was built by my sleepless nights, my injured fingers, my health, which is now irretrievable. I remember the first big deals. They came after long months of humiliation. I sat in the offices of those who laughed at me and silently swallowed the insults because I knew that the day would come when I would look down on them. And it came. I rose. And when I finally reached the top, I was a symbol of resilience, an example of how, even from nothing, you can create strength. I gave everything to my family. I could stay up all night to provide my children with education, send them abroad, give them something I never had. I was strict but fair. When they cried from their first defeat, I said, "Get up and go." And they went. Now they are going, but not to me. I remember their faces when they were little. How I threw them in the air, and they laughed as if the whole world was ours. I remember my wife, how she was waiting for me when I returned tired, but victorious. She was my rear, my home. She is long gone, and perhaps it was with her departure that my life lost its meaning. She believed that my children would never forget me. And now I see she was wrong. Over the years, losses came. Friends left, partners became enemies, and I held on. I'm used to standing where others have fallen. I've learned to be cold. I've learned to manipulate, to count my steps like a chess player. And maybe that's what keeps me alive now. That experience of struggle. But no one needs all that. My children don't ask about my past. They don't care how I rose. They look at me like a shadow about to dissolve. In their world, I'm a museum piece, an old clock standing in the corner. Sometimes I sit by the window and remember what my offices looked like. Bright offices, ringing phones, people waiting for my decision. And it seems to me that now I'm looking at a stranger. Was it really me? Or maybe it was someone else, and I'm just a copy, an exhausted remnant of that strength? The contrast between then and now cuts me like a knife, because I remember everything, and it's memory that poisons. If I didn't know who I was, perhaps it would be easier for me to accept the current oblivion. But I remember everything in detail, every step, every victory. And that's why today's indifference is the worst humiliation. Sometimes it seems to me that my children are even angry that I'm still alive, that I'm reminding them of a debt they don't want to pay. They would prefer that I silently disappear, leaving them only memories and possessions. But I'm still here, and I remember. Every time I think I've gotten used to indifference, life throws me a new humiliation. They don't seem loud or special, but it's the little things that cut the deepest. The last time I asked my son to help fix the roof, he didn't even listen. He said, "I have a meeting, Dad. We said you shouldn't go up there anymore." Hire someone. And hung up the phone. Hire someone. Doesn't he understand that for me this isn't a question of money, it's a question of dignity? I just wanted to see him around, so that we could do something together like we used to. But for him, I'm an unnecessary burden. My daughter last came 6 months ago. She stood on the doorstep, nervously turning the keys in her hands and saying that there's not much time. I tried to ask how things were going, like children, but she answered dryly, as if she were a stranger in front of her. She looked right through me, and that hurt more than any words could. And the grandson. Once he said to me straight in the eye, "You're behind the times, grandfather." Your words are worthless. I could hear laughter in his voice. And at that moment, it seemed to me that my heart in my chest had collapsed like an old wall. Once I dreamed of passing on my strength and experience to them. And now I see only a cold wall of contempt. In the hospital, they listen to me as if I were a talkative fool. The doctor flips through papers without looking up. When I dared to tell him about the chest pain, he waved it away. "It's normal at your age. Take the pills they prescribed for you." I left the office as if I had been thrown out like a rag. And suddenly I realized, in this world, my body is just a statistic, and my soul is nothing. At the store, the cashier gave me the wrong change several times. When I noticed, she grimaced. "Grandpa, you must have made a mistake." I felt people behind me start to smile. Someone even snorted. I put the coins back, swallowed the insult. They see me as an old man who confuses numbers, not a person who has spent decades calculating sums on which the lives of hundreds depended. I began to write down all these little things in an old diary that lies under the bed. I write names, dates, phrases there. Not to remember them. I remember them anyway. But to give them weight, so that each insult leaves a mark, does not dissolve in time. The pages are already full. There are the names of my children, grandchildren, those doctors, and even the cashier. I write them down coldly, without emotion, as if I were keeping accounts. Only instead of money, I count wounds. And each new insult is not just a line. It is a nail hammered into the tomb of my patience. I began to notice that I feel a strange relief when I write. It is like a ritual. I close the diary and know, this pain will not dissolve. It is fixed. I will not lose it again. People think that I am weak, that my life is melting away. But they are wrong. I still remember how to play the game. Only the game has become different. And perhaps it is still ahead. That day the sky was gray and heavy, like my soul. I was leaving the store, carrying 2 bags of groceries. Every step was hard, but I stubbornly carried them myself. I even liked feeling this burden. It reminded me that I was still alive. Young men were standing next to me at the bus stop. I could feel their gazes, cold, mocking. The bags tore. A few apples rolled across the asphalt. I bent down to pick them up, but I didn't have enough strength. Then I raised my head and asked, "Guys, help me, please." They looked at each other, and instead of a hand, I heard laughter. Rude, loud, humiliating. One said, "Grandpa, can I also take the bag home?" Ha ha! The others picked it up. I stood amidst their laughter, and my apples rolled across the pavement. And at that moment I felt something snap inside me. My vision blurred, my heart beat slowly and heavily. I could no longer hear their words, only a ringing in my ears. I looked at them and saw not people, but shadows. They were not laughing at me personally. They were laughing at my whole life, at all those years of struggle, at all the sacrifices I had made. Their contempt was the final blow that awakened in me what I had long kept in the dark. I picked up the apple and felt a strange peace. Silence poured into me, and this silence was no longer empty. It was thick, filled with anger, a cold force that I had once known well. I did not shout. I did not curse. I simply watched, and it seemed to me that one of those boys flinched for a moment at my gaze. When I returned home, my house was no longer lonely. Every wall, every corner breathed with me, as if the darkness I had hidden for years had finally taken its place. I sat down at the table, opened my diary, and wrote in large letters, "The game begins." I will no longer be a victim. I will not expect mercy from children or strangers. Now I will assign roles myself. And everyone who has hurt me, everyone who has allowed themselves to be laughed at or ignored, will become part of my new chess game. This will not be a fight. I will not go at those who are younger and stronger with my fists. I know other methods. Quiet, precise, ruthless. I know how to count steps, manipulate, and push people against each other with my foreheads. And now this experience will become my weapon. When evening covered the windows with a black cloth, for the first time in a long time, I felt that I was breathing deeply. I am no longer an old grandfather who can be ignored. I am a player, and this game is just beginning. I thought for a long time about what my blow should be. Not a scream, not a dirty reprisal. I don't want to be a beast in their eyes. It is enough for me to show them their own faces at the moment when they will be forced to feel what I felt. And the most terrible thing is that they must feel it themselves, without an obvious culprit nearby. I have always known how to count. Now I count not money, but the steps of the people around me. I remembered old connections, people who once came for advice, those whom I got out of debt, quietly remember my name. I did not ask them to do anything illegal. I simply asked them to remember. About small favors, about information that could be obtained with words, not blows. Someone sent me a letter that had long been lost. Someone remembered a bill that had never been written out. These were pieces of the puzzle that made up the picture. I learned to see weaknesses not from the position of strength, but from the position of truth. When people are used to living in masks, it is enough to remove one thread for others to start tearing. I wrote letters, unsigned, that cast a shadow over luxurious dinners and quiet negotiations. I called without saying much, just a hint to arouse suspicion in the heart. I did not blackmail. I pushed. I became that invisible mirror into which they had to look. My goal was not to destroy. My goal was to provoke a reaction, and people react impulsively. One of my sons received a letter with a detailed mention of an old agreement that he wanted to forget. He responded with harsh words to the stop, and this reaction was heard by others. Now their partners questioned his stability. My daughter, to whom I had once entrusted some of the affairs, found herself in a public dispute over a small contract. People who were afraid of her suddenly began to suspect that she was hiding something from them. The grandson lost one of those small supports he could previously rely on, and a rustle appeared in his life. A business friend suggested an inconvenient project to him, and he, not knowing how to respond, showed nervousness that someone took advantage of. I did not set fire to their houses or break their bones. My revenge is a blade with which I carefully cut through the lining of their lives. Society began to interpret these coincidences as a series of unfortunate events, but people who were close saw a different picture. Quarrels, distrust, things that turn out from the soul what they had previously carefully hidden. They began to speak against each other, and each such dialogue revealed their next weakness. The hardest thing was to watch them throw accusations at each other. Previously, I myself saved them from crises, corrected mistakes, took their mistakes on myself, because I believed that the family was a common boat. Now they were rowing in different directions, and the boat was wound up. I arranged everything so that there was no obvious involvement. My notes, letters, and hints remained in the shadows, and that was the sweetest thing. They felt the trail, but they did not see the hands that had made it. I stayed in the house, walked through the rooms, looked at the walls, and inside I felt this strange silence. Not emptiness, but fullness. When they argued on the phone, my hand barely touched the pen. I added a new line to the diary, as if I were putting a check mark in the result column. I watched their faces change. Pride cracks, self-confidence disappears, plans fall apart. Sometimes I felt a pang of conscience. Small, like a bug crawling on the skin. But it quickly fell silent under the roar of the truth I was pulling out. They taught me that honor is when you are recognized, when you are looked into the eyes and greeted with a hand. My honor was now measured by how I returned their own faces to them. Pale, scared, confused, I am left in the shadows. When it comes to the finale, I like to sit on my balcony and watch them break under the weight of their own actions. No one associated these small catastrophes with me. They considered them life failures. But I know this is not a coincidence. This is the right game that I have been playing for years, and every scream they make is my silent applause. My days have become rhythmic again, not like they used to be, with calls, meetings, bustling movement. But now I don't wake up in a void. A new silence has settled in the house, the silence of a force that knows it has done its job. I no longer seek gratitude. I don't need their words or applause. They can still think their troubles are just an unfortunate coincidence. But now, no one dares to look down on me. A fracture has appeared in their voices. I can hear it even through the phone. My son speaks more carefully. My daughter avoids harsh notes. My grandson lowers his eyes when we meet by chance. They don't know why, but they feel it. I didn't break their bodies. I broke the shell they had grown around themselves to hide their indifference. And now each of them has learned to look at me differently. Not with love, perhaps, but at least with respect. And respect is more precious to me now than any words. Society also looks at me differently. Neighbors who used to pass by now greet me. Someone feels something incomprehensible in me, something that is better not to ignore. I am no longer transparent. I exist again. I have understood one thing: old age is not the end. This is another stage of the game. In youth we fight for victories, in maturity, for success, and inheritance. And in old age we fight for dignity. And this fight is more cruel than all others, because here the enemy is indifference. I defeated it in my family, in my little world. I am neither a hero nor a monster. I am an old man who has learned not to forgive, but also not to destroy unnecessarily. My revenge has become a lesson, and I know, now they will never forget that even in the oldest heart, a fire can flare up, capable of changing everything around. When I opened my diary today, I looked at the last pages for a long time. There are names, dates, events. Each line is a wound, each check mark is my answer. But now I have decided not to put a date or a name. I have written just one sentence. It will become my epitaphic summary, my silence that will sound louder than any screams. The one who is forgotten can become the one who cannot be ignored. I closed the diary and felt peace. Finally.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.